Welcome, Unfiltered Conversations with Women Leaders like yourself, Alyese. I'm so excited to have you today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. There's some people that when you meet, you just click and you love their energy. And Alyese, that was you for me. We haven't known each other long, but I was just I left the call so jazzed up.
I know. I think it's a collective like 63 minutes that we've known each other.
I know, right?
No, but I love that energy when you meet somebody. It's like, wow, we would have been friends in a different life and we should be friends now.
Exactly. And you are joining us today from New Orleans, correct?
Yes.
You were
Yes,
my first out of Denver, out of Colorado and St. Louis, Missouri. So this is fun
yes.
for you.
Yes. No, we're right outside of New Orleans, but I mean, this is home for me and we moved here from Atlanta about a year ago and I wouldn't be anywhere else.
Yes, well, I'll have to come check it out.
Oh,
Well,
please.
the first question I love to do is first job and current job. So tell us, where did you start your professional journey?
Sure. Well, I will tell you, I got my real professional inspiration from selling Cutco knives. Have you
Oh,
ever heard of
shut up.
Cutco? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was sophomore in college, and I didn't realize that you could like make your own schedule for a career. Um, so I sold knives for 2 summers. I made a boatload of money, and I was like, okay, I think sales really could be something. You get to set your own schedule and be as successful as you want. So when I graduated, I took a job in insurance sales.
Oh, wow.
And selling insurance is a little different than selling knives door to door. Um, maybe not any less dangerous. Um, but I had a territory where I, was calling on brokers and, a little 23-year-old in the middle of Kentucky, like, hi, sir, you've been in this business for longer than I've been alive. Do you want to buy some insurance from me? So it, it certainly was the school of hard knocks for relationship building and contact management and, long before cell phones and CRMs and all that kind of stuff. But I loved sales and I loved sort of not only the personal freedom of it, but learning the process of the business relationship and the business kind of dance, as it were.
I always find it impressive when people have done door-to-door sales. I mean, what was
Oh,
that? I'm a secret introvert that has like serious social anxiety. So the thought of like going to someone's door and knocking on their door and be like, can I sell you this knife? I mean,
yes.
what was that
Well,
like?
so says the lady who's running a live podcast, but we won't talk about that right now.
Confidential.
Um,
Fine.
so the knife thing was actually a referral business. So you called on your friends' parents and then they referred you out. But I did work for what is now Rico, but it was Lanier back then. And I sold copiers door to door, which I really think I haven't looked in it for a while, but I actually don't think you can do that anymore because all the
Okay.
buildings are locked and nobody lets you in anymore. It's completely unnerving and completely empowering all at the same time because you walk in and they're like, did you see the no soliciting sign? You're like, I'm not soliciting. I'm consultatively asking you if you like your printer system.
Oh my God. So are you an adrenaline junkie, someone who like enjoys that nervous feeling?
Yeah, well, that or just the idea that I solved the puzzle that you thought was unsolvable, right? Like you
Yes.
thought, gatekeeper, that you could keep me out, and I secretly found a way to save you some money and make your life easier so you like me when it was all over.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And so then now tell us more about what you're doing now.
So now my career sort of evolved sales into marketing. I actually took an internship when I was almost 30 just to get
Oh,
into the
cool.
marketing agency space. And my husband has always been on the experiential marketing side. So we've always sort of complemented each other. I was the sales and strategy, and he was the take the picture and get it done. And so 2 weeks before the pandemic, I was working for myself. He had a partnership, and that partnership sort of dissolved overnight because of all of the um, fantastic stuff that was going on in February of 20.
Yeah.
And so Matt came to me and he's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I was like, we have to do this together. Our skills complement each other so well that it would really make sense for us to take this on. And so we did.
Okay.
And then 2 weeks later, the world shut down. And while we had rebranded the partnership that he had and had $1 million worth of business on the table, events were now illegal overnight. And so that was a little bit of a
So
shock, I guess, is the small way to say that.
oh, let me back up. So you and your husband launched a company at the end of February 2020. which then the world imploded basically Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And
all the while you have 4 children.
at that time, yes, 4 children under the age of 9. Um,
Panic
and
attack, mental insanity, like what was happening there?
me and my closet became very close because that's where I would go and just cry to try
Yeah.
to figure out what
What are
was
the
going
bathroom
on.
for, what
That's right.
are the
That's
2?
because in the mornings, right, you had to be, no matter what your job was, you had to be teacher. So I was teacher in the morning and then business builder, by the afternoon. Um, it, it it was so unnerving and so deafening that we almost couldn't not keep going, right?
Yeah,
Like, don't
yeah,
tell me I can't provide for my family and create an events business, even though events are illegal. And a lot of companies in our industry pivoted. I can't stand that word, but they
right?
pivoted and went from in-person events to virtual events, which to me felt like an oxymoron. It was like, there's no such thing as a virtual event. You're either together or you're not.
Right.
Um, and so we pushed through. The truth is, to all of you fantastic listeners, we liquidated every red cent we had. 100% of our 401k. It was literally, when I tell you, all chips on the table, again, with 4 children. And we got no clients. We got
You like went all
absolutely,
in with your chips, and then you're like,
yep. And the dealer ran the table. And so we pitched a client in 2 days before Thanksgiving, actually, of 20. They said, you know what, we are going to have a decision in a week. So we
"Yeah,
thought, oh, phew, 20 is going to come and go. It'll be a foregone conclusion. We succeeded.
yes."
And then we were in 21 and no word from the pitch that we had done. And so I went to Matt and I said, listen, I'm a dreamer and you are the practical one. But at some point, we have to face reality that we have given this literally everything we have. We have a month's worth of income left. That's it. Like, we are going to have to sell the house. We're going to have to, our kids were in private school at the time. Like, we had to, anyway,
Yeah, talk about going all in.
all in. And so, and I told him, I said, I want this as badly as you do, but we have to, at some point, we have to be practical.
Totally.
And within a week, we got the go ahead from the client that we had pitched. At this point, now it's March of 21. So the client we had pitched about 5 months before came
Yes.
through and we had a client. So it was like, okay, there's something to hold on to.
Here we go.
Here we go. Ironically, that was our website for a little while, was here we go. Until you have to spell that a lot and then spell go, Geaux, it didn't go over well. But then really from that, we built a ton of momentum. And it was sort of like at that point, all the stars aligned. We're getting referrals, getting clients from clients, and really just built up this head of steam that we had originally set out to build, because our whole goal was, at least in the agency world, so many of the big giant agencies, as it is true with most big companies, you just become a number. Your clients are a number. You throw more staff at it, you throw more people at it, you throw more like proposals at it, Christmas gifts, and at the end of the day, the client doesn't know if they're happy or not. They just are still your client. And
Mhm.
we really wanted to change that, as well as the production side of the business, which usually took the lumps for the budgets not being big enough or the client expectations all falling on them to fulfill, no matter what was sold. So once we had some clients to really prove what we were capable of, we hit the ground running and haven't looked back.
Wow, and yeah, and your company has grown and you're very successful in a short amount of time, and you definitely,
Yes.
reaching the $1,000,000 plateau in terms of revenue is a really big thing. It sounds like you guys surpassed that.
Yes, we did in a very short time. We've grown almost 100% year over year since 20. So it has been wild.
Full steam
And
ahead, it
full
sounds like.
steam ahead. And getting that feedback from the clients that actually they they believe in what we're trying to do and they've experienced the other side, so they see the difference in what we're doing. And I think that's the reassuring part, right? That when you set out to do something and you're trying to disrupt or you're trying to change, and our industry, the events industry, and a lot of people don't understand when I say events, they're like, oh, you plan weddings. No, I don't. I did that for a while, but I don't plan weddings.
That was gonna be my next question. You know, you hear the term events and people do think of weddings or,
Right.
big parties, what is the difference between events and experiential?
Sure. Um, the fact that anybody can say experiential is half the battle. Usually it's experimental marketing, and I will take that. It happens. Um,
There are some
but
experiments.
there are sometimes. So experiential marketing is when a brand or a service, product wants to put their brand in front of customers, potential customers, outside of their normal channels of business.
Mm,
So not even POS and the end cap that you see in stores. We are the driver behind brands being in front of people. So anytime you have sampled something, try, hey, will you just come try our software? Or you see people in t-shirts under a tent and you're there for the music festival, we're the power behind those brands.
yeah,
So
that's cool.
creating that experience for people to experience the brand, and it creates a much deeper connection. A lot of times people will say, well, we do digital marketing, or we have an ad campaign, and we have however many impressions with our ad campaign, which is powerful, and never is a choice between, well, you should do experiential instead of ads. They are complementary, because once the person experiences what your brand offers and why it relates to them, the next time they see the ad, they feel like they're part of something versus just being served another piece of advertising.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen a change in the market about people wanna feel part of the brand versus just
Mm.
sold to.
Absolutely. And I think there's a huge rush after 20, right?
Right.
Not only did people, because that was the question, are events going to come back? And not only did they come back, they came back in a huge way, because people want to be out, they want to experience. I think it's that kind of ride or die mentality. So once that happened, the brands capitalized on that, because that engagement creates a relationship.
Yeah.
And that shift, I use the example all the time that there was a white paper done on the Clinton Trump campaign. This is not a political conversation, but uh, the Trump campaign ran "Make America Great Again," so it was very outwardly focused, not focused on the candidate. In the Hillary campaign, her slogan was "I'm with her," so the voter was with the candidate.
Yeah.
And the postmortem study was, if she would have flipped her verbiage to "she's with me" instead of "I'm with her," then the "Make America Great Again" and "she's with me" would have run on a more parallel platform.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
And so I think that's the way it is with brands, creating an opportunity for your ideal target client to see themselves in your brand versus telling them why your brand is so important in their life. It's the complete shift in making that lasting connection.
Well, it reminds me of StoryBrand. I don't know if you're familiar with StoryBrand with Donald Miller, but he talks about how companies too often try to make themselves the hero in the
That's
story
right. Yes.
versus, the client is really on their hero's journey, and it's the company's job to come along and be the guide and
Yes.
understand. So that's sorta it sounds like you're sorta saying a similar thing.
Yes. And it's very easy, but so many clients of ours, well, not clients of ours, but people looking to get into experiential, it's all about, well, let me show them our new feature, let me push this, but it's such an easy slight shift, and it
Mhm.
makes all the difference. So creating that environment where people want to come in first of all, and engage, and then giving those brand ambassadors or the client the opportunity to really tell their story at that time is where the magic is made.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up events and whether or not they were gonna come back. I mean, events have definitely come back, and I love seeing that because I am an events girl,
Hmm.
attending, but, hosting.
Running.
But, it's funny, I don't know if you've seen this, while events have come back, I feel like they've come back in a different way.
Mhm.
What people were willing and wanting to go to before is very different. So for a company that's wanting to put on events or do experiential marketing, there's definitely feels like there's some changes to what works and what doesn't. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think people have, like you said, if they're going to spend their money and spend their time, which has, I think the world has understood what a commodity time is, and an irreplaceable one at that, they're being very selective about where they go. But I do think the breadth of what is being offered has also expanded.
Oh, interesting.
So I think the key is knowing who your target is and where do they want to be, and being where they want to be. So it has changed. I think, or at least from our perspective, one of the biggest things is people just don't take it for granted, right? They're very intentional about the attendees, that is, very intentional about going, about creating experiences while they're there, either with their group of friends or their, trade shows, being with their companies and creating communities there. But I think the brands have picked up on, it's no longer, well, I'll just saddle up on this tour that's going to stop in 12 places. It's
Right.
about really making sure that you are where your client is and that your client connects with you while they're there.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. Now, backing up, you said that you started this business with your husband.
Yes.
I have run into more and more people that are doing businesses together, whether it's family owned, father, daughter, husband,
Mhm.
wife, all the things. What is
Yeah.
that like? And what are some pieces of advice you'd give to someone else out there that's maybe going to start a business with their husband or family member?
Buckle up, sister. That's my that's my advice. I think one of the reasons it worked for us is because our skill sets were complementary. That was really the foundation. We both brought two totally different things to the table.
Mhm.
So we come at things from very different vantage points.
Yeah.
He had the experience in what it takes once we would sell something or fabricate something and put it on the road. He knew what it took to do that part.
Yeah.
And I knew what it took to get a client, get in front, make a presentation, build a deck, those kinds of things. So I think I think my first piece of advice would be know who your partner is.
Mhm.
Again, dad, brother, husband, sister, whoever. Know your partner and know their skills. And
Mhm.
do you complement or do you overlap?
Yes.
um, because defining, like, it's a silly story, but when we were going through premarital counseling, right, to build up to the big day, we were asked who was going to unload the dishwasher. And I was like, what an odd question to have to define in order to walk down the aisle. And almost 18 years later, I get it. Like, he
Yes.
has his roles and I have mine. And so we kind of know our lanes.
Yeah.
So I think that's been huge, and truly communication.
Yes.
We have to talk a lot.
Yep.
And sometimes we agree, and sometimes we do not even live on the same planet. And so trying to navigate those conversations, because we're communicating on all levels, right?
Right.
Kids, business, house stuff, vacation stuff, kids in camp. That's my next conversation this afternoon. Like, our access to each other is 24/7. And so we're always talking about all the things. So my last piece of advice would be time blocking and knowing when to have the personal conversations, when to have the business conversations, when to delegate, how to bring other people into a relationship that was formed on a very different level, right? It's not like you just met somebody and thought, hey, oh, you'd be great to start a business with. Our connection is so personal that bringing other people in sometimes feels intrusive,
Yes.
but we have to find places where this is best for the business and coming to those conversations. So it's wouldn't change it. We are really great partners. He keeps me level and I keep him looking toward the future.
But I
He's a
think your
very
advice,
now and I'm a very future person. So, but
well,
it's
it's
great. It's just knowing yourself and knowing the other person.
totally. And I think that advice is relevant whether you're, working with your husband or a business partner. I mean,
That's right.
everything you're saying is so applicable across the board. And being a founder CEO is such a tough thing. And it's an interesting transition going from a founder-led company to a CEO company. And what I mean by that is I feel like the founder-led company, it very much is like your friends and family and people you know and trust and have known forever. And you're
Mhm.
this tight-knit group, and you're all sort of dividing and conquering and just getting things done. But
Mhm.
when you really are scaling that business and making that transition to what I would call CEO led, you are
Right.
bringing in outsiders,
That's right.
and it's no longer we're all in this caravan together, just dividing and conquering. We're in separate cars and we got to figure out how to get from A to B. And
That's
it
right.
is such a shift. And, I've worked for the companies that have that tight knit and you're stepping in as this outsider and it can be challenging. I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, how are you guys navigating that transition and
Sure.
what lessons, I mean, you brought it up, which made me think of it, that it's obviously something you guys are navigating and learning from.
Well, and I think what's been interesting to your point is when you have like one client, you still feel like this little family of, okay, we're all moving in the same direction.
Right.
When your client base starts to scale,
Mhm.
that's for us anyway, that's been when we've had to have those hard conversations. And I think that brings up a great point where our scope of geniuses individually don't always amount to running a mega business, right? And so knowing where I can stay in this sandbox and really succeed, and I can be over here and succeed. But if we want to get to here, we've got to bring in somebody else outside.
Yes.
Um, and that's not always an easy decision to make. So I think for us, it's just been making sure that we're taking incremental steps. And as those steps come up, figuring out where do we need to scale, because you can't scale across the board. Is
Yeah.
it staffing? Is it finance? Is it outside money? Is it like where are the pieces where we have to grow? Um, because if you try to take it off all at one time and or take it on rather all at one time, you're going to explode, and then the whole goal of what you were trying to do gets lost.
Totally. Totally. Going down a different path, you were talking about experiential marketing and just really knowing your customers.
Mhm.
It's interesting. It seems like that's such a straightforward thing to say. Know your customer, know your customer. But the more I get to know founders and the more I talk to businesses, that's a lot harder than people realize, and, like,
Mhm.
really zeroing in and picking a lane and really, because you can't speak to everyone, right? Especially
Right.
when you're doing experiential marketing, you really are being targeted in terms of creating this experience for a certain customer.
Mhm.
You run into that, and what advice do you have for brands as they're trying to figure out, how to really make that impact and connect on a really deep way?
Sure. Well, I think it's interesting, at least in the agency business, no matter experiential or otherwise, there's a lot of opportunity for shutting down a category, right? Because once I have one spirit client, I really shouldn't have more than one, or else my creative juices are being spread too thin.
Yes.
Um, so it's kind of difficult in the agency world because while you can target and become a certain type of agency, you can't say, well, oh, you can. I mean, you absolutely can, but are you doing your clients the best service to say, well, we only do this industry, but now everybody's just getting sort of a generic version of the same thinking.
Mm,
Um, I think for us, and the way that it has worked for us is to be completely transparent. And I know that sounds so cliched. Everybody says that, well, we're transparent pricing and other, we mean it. So when we're going to a client, it's what you see is what you get.
yeah,
And if you want to call us at 3 o'clock and demand a Zoom, then you might see me in my pajama pants still, but I'm working and we're getting stuff done.
right.
Um, so I think it is being transparent. But as a brand seeks out an agency, my advice would be, what is it that you want? What have
Yes.
you experienced in the past that you did like, and what have you experienced that you didn't? Because if you just find a new agency with a shinier logo who puts you in the same position that you were in before, you've just moved. You haven't, evolved.
Yes.
And I think that so many brands, like you said about founder versus CEO versus company versus corporation, when you get bigger,
Mhm.
you are removed further and further and further from the heart of the company. And so it gets delegated to your team.
Yeah.
So knowing or making sure that your team knows what your culture expects, what your brand is trying to put forward, um, which isn't always easy, but I think having that will tell you which kind of agency you want to partner with.
Yes.
Um, and if the agency isn't giving you what you want, I mean, it's like a relationship. It's any relationship. If you're with a bad partner, leave and go find somebody who's going to value you. And it's not easy to move all your assets and move all your graphics. And you just invested in a huge tent or a huge, truck and trailer or what. Take it with you when you go.
Yeah.
But I think for us, we have one of our biggest clients called Matt, my husband and partner. And he said, listen, can I talk to you for a second? And Matt's, sure. What do you need? He said, I actually need some personal advice.
Oh,
And he was moving across the country, and we had just done the same thing. So he sought out Matt for personal advice. And I think that's really the pinnacle of when you have reached a strong relationship with your client, when not only are they trusting you with their business and kind of letting you do the right thing for them professionally, but when personally they're like, man, I trust you to give me some good advice on a personal level. So we're really proud of that. That's one of our cornerstones, that partnership is paramount.
Well, I think that's so key, right? I mean, when you're letting somebody help create an experience for your brand, you have to feel like they understand you and see you and get
Yes.
your business. And that is a very vulnerable experience for a lot of business owners.
Hmm.
And it's not inexpensive, nor should it be,
No.
right? But that's like taking this huge leap of faith that someone's going to understand my brand, my baby, and be
Hmm.
able to showcase it to the world in a way that makes sense for me. So I'm not surprised to see how important that personal relationship and how it overlaps like that.
Well, and especially, I would imagine in some ways it's kind of like being a therapist and getting a new client because they
Yeah,
come to you and they're like, this is happening. And you have to dig a little deeper to figure out why this is happening. And so, especially when a brand is launching a new product or a new service, and this has happened more than once, where they go, okay, so this is coming up. I don't have any assets. I don't know what the brand palette's going to look like, but this is the product. So can you give me some ideas? Sure. That'll be great.
yes.
So, knowing how to help them articulate and like you said, work congruently with their teams
Right.
to help formulate, and that's where we love to be in the creative process, is right at the beginning, because if we can assimilate as part of your team and not just a vendor that plugs in, then that's better for everybody. We can tell your story the way you want it told versus our interpretation of it. And then therefore that translates to how your clients and customers are going to interpret your story and how it fits into their lives. So it all starts with, what are we trying to accomplish and how can we help you do that?
Absolutely. And earlier in this conversation, you brought up digital marketing and the stats that you can kind of say like this many people saw it and this. I would imagine with experiential marketing, while it has a huge impact, how are you able to track that to
Mhm.
say this investment was a great investment? I'm glad. Whereas like there are other types of marketing that have a more concrete ROI
Yeah,
potentially. Would you agree
absolutely.
that it's harder to showcase that?
100%. And sometimes clients go into it saying, you know what, I don't really care. If we can get, the phrases cans in hands, right? If I can
Okay.
get cans in hands, that's all I care. So I count cans.
Oh, okay.
What no matter what you're sampling, that's
Yeah.
just the phrase. So if we as the agency can prove we moved this many cases or this many units, that's ROI for them. They can assume how many people that have been touched. Other ways are like couponing. Where coupon redemption gets tracked. But again, when you're talking about a large event, and this is something, again, for brands to keep in mind, if you're going to be in, let's say, the New York Wine and Food Festival,
Yes.
people come from all over to New York Wine and Food. So if you're doing some type of, well, you can't do coupons and alcohol, but if you're doing some type of coupon redemption or, or rebate back, you have to look at that investment in New York and know that it's going to spread back across the country. So
Yes.
that's just something to keep in mind, whether you're going to be hyper local or something where the population is then going to regress back to their home state. However, couponing is amazing. And then there are, which sometimes it's just creepy to talk about, like all the RFID tracking, and you can track phones and pings and bodies and that sort of thing. Of how many people were there and how many people were within proximity of your tent, exposed to your branding. So there are different ways, but you're right to say that it's not as concrete.
Mhm.
Um, but even if you got, a million views on your digital ad, views don't necessarily translate to buys. And
Exactly.
so it's a very similar relationship. But what we can prove that a digital ad can't is if I have tracked your cans in hands, that person walked away with a can, versus the digital ad that we've become so immune to these days. While still important and a great part of a marketing portfolio, you can scroll past an ad. So you served the impression, but did it get through to the client?
Ah, such a good point. And so, there's a lot of women that love building relationships and are great at events and love marketing. If someone's listening, what advice do you have for them about, the world of experiential marketing and how to dive in? And before you answer that, I will say I find it really impressive that you took an internship at 30 to learn the world of marketing. I kind of skimmed
Yes.
over that earlier, but I just was thinking about that. I think that speaks volumes about your dedication to like learning and growing. So I just want to call that back out. I think
Oh,
that's really
sure. Well, I think at that time, I applied for several jobs, and the feedback I kept getting was, "You're too old." And I was like, "Well, how is it possible that I'm too old and I'm, 6 years out of college or whatever?" And it was that they wanted you right out of school so they could cultivate you, train you, teach you how to agency, which undoubtedly is nothing you learn in college.
yeah.
And so by that time in my life, they just assumed that I had had too much experience to, be untaught.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the only way I could break in. And I was willing to take, I mean, I think I was making like $200 a month at this internship, um, just to get the experience and say that I learned what a trafficking, person was to drop off the file folders. And so I have all this, so now I can be in an agency world. But I think when it comes to experiential or events in general, I think the best advice I can give is it's not as sexy as you think it is.
I mean, right?
It's, we deal in zip ties and band-aids and, tent weights and like I had a friend the other day on LinkedIn. His meme was, at 20, you were like, I want to be a graphic designer. At 22, you're like, I want to be the creative director. And by 35, you're like, team, can you please change Helvetica to Times New Roman? Thanks. So I think that sex appeal of we do events is it's not as alluring as it seems to be. But once all the stuff is put up and once the event is in motion, the vibe and the energy, then like you said earlier, the high that you get from it is amazing because and that's the other thing with being in person. You
Right.
see people's reactions, you feel their connection to each other, to the product, to the experience. That's unbeatable.
Yeah.
So I would say, woman or man, if you're looking to get into experiential marketing, a great way to start if you have no experience and you don't want to take a $200 internship.
In this economy, I don't think many people can do
I
that.
don't think you can do that. You'd have to Uber and all the things.
Yeah.
Would be to get in with a brand ambassador agency. They're everywhere.
Oh,
And those people they're like operate like a staffing agency. So you get hired on with them. And then when they have an event in your area where they need somebody, they will see if you're available and want to plug in. And you get to be that person wearing the t-shirt, talking to the people who are attending the event, helping to explain the product. It's a great way to build your skill set, even just in general for clients, management and relationship, no matter really what industry you end up going into. It's sort of like being an actor. But just to understand the truth of what putting on an event means, because the post portion of the setup and the actual event is super fun, but there's a lot of work that goes up to getting to that point.
yeah, and it sounds like being able to see behind the curtain and really understand, like, what it
Yes.
actually takes to create this, because we're just seeing the beautiful end result.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah,
it's great, right? And a lot of work went into that, especially some of these really large experiences when they've replicated a television show or these huge experiences. But the meat and the potatoes of it is cans and hands, and it's not as sexy as it seems, but it's super rewarding.
but I think that goes for a bigger conversation of being a founder CEO, right? Like, I can
Mhm.
remember in college daydreaming one day of being a CEO, weirdly, I wanted that, and then
Not weird.
I didn't even know what it stood for. I didn't even know it was chief executive officer. I just knew boss. So for some reason, I wanted to be in charge. But I think that often what we assume the experience is going to be like versus the reality when you get in, it
Mhm.
feels so different. Being a
Absolutely.
CEO is amazing and it's incredibly difficult and not nearly as sexy or glamorous as you could imagine. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think that's where creating communities come in so necessarily.
Right.
And not just people like you, right? People
Right.
who can help support you, people who are a few steps ahead of you and a few steps behind you, that you can feel like you're pouring into somebody who's coming up and you can get advice from people who have been where you are. And I think being a mom and a CEO, it's hard to find the time, right? Because you're split in so many directions. But I think that that misunderstanding of what it is can be easily solved by surrounding yourself with people who are going to help get you through the times when you're like, why did I do this? What was I thinking? And, you know, not crying in your closet because you're scared to death, but how, you know, how they can pull you through that and creating those connections. And I know you have done an amazing job with your network.
Yeah.
But I think it's amazing, and having those people with you is so important.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And so what's next on the horizon? I mean, you've hit this level of success that so few companies actually hit.
Oh, thank
Where
you.
where are you going? What are you doing?
You know, I think we still have a huge, huge threshold that we can butt up against. We are out to disrupt the market in as many ways as you possibly can, right? I don't think we can do it the way that Uber did it, right? But I think that when you look at this apathy that we're seeing, and we're hearing from clients, right? I didn't feel seen at my last agency. Um, there's an enormous opportunity for growth, for creating an experience for the clients before the event ever starts. And
Mhm.
that's in the relationship that they have with us, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling acknowledged, feeling understood, so that when they do hand over the brand to us, they actually trust that we'll do what we said we would, not just execute an event, which pretty much anybody could do. So I think that's one path of it. But for me personally, I'm a multi-passionate at heart. And so I think for me that sort of getting my arms around all the marketing skills that I've learned along the way, the selling skills, and really helping in our digital world that I didn't grow up in my career with cell phones and laptops and
Right.
email. I was knocking on doors and sending handwritten letters and finding a way to take that mentality and apply it in this world. And despite everybody saying how hard it is to be a mom and run a business, be really successful at doing both. Because it's really important for me to be present for my kids, not just have them. And, you know, a lot of the women that I look up to who have built amazing businesses were lucky enough to do that either before kids or when their kids were itty bitty, which is still has its own challenges.
Sure.
I'm just doing it when mine are a little older. So, you know, trying to be an advocate for those women who are like, "Ugh, it's too late. I missed my window." No, you didn't. There's still time.
Yeah.
So trying to cultivate that message on a different kind of personal, professional level for people who want to give it a shot. It's not too late.
I love that because you're right. You know, it's like so many women my age and older, it's like, well, Instagram, TikTok, blah, you know, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
I might be 45, but I love me some TikTok, you know, and you're never, it's because I'm 17 at heart. I mean, who knows
Yes.
what it is, but I really appreciate that message. I mean, you have 4 kids, you know, they're in all these different age groups and you're running a really awesome company. And I don't think it's ever too late, but I think that fear piece and the how the heck can I do that or not having those resources
Mhm.
or role models or exposure to women like yourself doing it.
Well, and I think there aren't a lot of women doing what we do, right? There aren't a lot of CEO women in recognizable companies who have reached that pinnacle while raising their children.
Yes.
Um, and I just, you know, we're in such an amazing time in our culture right now that this whole women first and women recognition and, you know, no second class citizen. I think it's so amazing that we get to I have 3 girls. I have 3 girls and 1 boy.
Oh,
And I get to tell my girls that anything is possible and mean it. They told us that, but you had to still fight your way through it a little bit. And there will still be challenges. But I think the biggest struggle that women of a certain age experience is having to choose. You
yeah.
should either work or you should be a mom. And those who try to do both, you don't fit in on either side. Oh, well, you're too much of a working mom to volunteer at the school, or you're too much of a stay-at-home mom to really understand business. You've been out too long. And that's just a whole lot of curse words.
Yeah.
I don't agree. I don't agree with either side of that. And I think there's a place for both. And I think to your point, we didn't grow up with TikTok and Instagram. However, what an amazing platform for everybody now to have a voice to say, this is what I am. And if you feel like you're like me, stick around and let's kind of plow through this together, because I think that opportunity to build community where you feel seen is one of the most superpowers you could possibly have.
Oh, I totally agree. And you're not just telling your daughters, you're showing them.
Hmm.
You're walking the walk, which I think is so impactful.
Well, your son's a little bit younger, but I also think involving them in the business. My oldest, who will be 13 on Monday, um, she, we had a client call this week, and her first question every time we tell her that we had a pitch, is it something I can wear? Like a t-shirt, because we have a couple of alcohol clients, so I can't exactly have her
Yeah.
running around at school in an alcohol t-shirt. Yeah, is it something I can wear?
Yeah.
So involving them and letting them see, like, hey, can y'all help pack these boxes so we can ship these out? Can y'all help, create the Christmas gifts or whatever, involving them and letting them see that you can do a little bit of everything and still have a little bit of everything, and that's okay. That's been super fun.
That's awesome. And that kind of makes me think of our signature question, which was, of course, inspired by Sarah Blakely and the fact that we're coffee conversations. So
Yes.
what would you put on your mug so that your daughter or other people can see every day when you're drinking it, something to inspire them?
And listen, I love me some Sarah Blakely. She is I mean, if I could meet one person, it's her.
Nice.
Um,
Sarah, are you listening? We'd
I
love to
know.
meet you.
Hashtag Sarah Blakely. So I here in New Orleans, right? Mardi Gras is huge, and people always know "Les le bon temps roulé," let the good times roll.
Oh,
But another thing we say down here is "parade your crazy," and it's just a way to say, just let it fly. Whether it's Mardi Gras or another time, kind of put it out there and let it fly. But a word that means so much to me is the word moxie, because it means nerve or grit or determination, and it almost digs a little deeper than it's like something you have, right? So if I could put something on a coffee mug, it would be parade your moxie, because I
ooh.
think that we all have some version of it. You said earlier, yours is very introverted and sort of not put on display. Mine's clearly on the complete other end of the spectrum. Um, but I think if you kind of let your guard down, let your fear down, and not be unwilling to put that on parade, you will find that people have exactly the need for what you are offering, and they will connect to that, and they will never let go. And people love a parade. I mean, Mardi Gras is the ultimate experience. If you haven't been, you have to come next year.
I
Um,
love that.
but it's a give and take experience, and it is so larger than life that I think if we give each other the permission to parade our moxie, we would be really astounded in the most amazing way of what would come out of it.
Oh, that's so good. It's so good. I definitely need a mug that says that.
I think I've already designed it in my head.
I know, I was thinking, this is what you do. I can see these coming out for
Yeah,
sale. Well, if
yeah.
someone wants to learn more about what you do or get that mug when you make it,
Yes.
how can someone follow up with you or stay in the loop of all the cool things you're doing?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. So for our company, we are G-XM, because Go Experiential was way too hard to spell out. Um, and then all of my personal stuff, both branding advice and motherhood and Moxie, all of my handles are Alyese Black.
Yes. Well, I encourage everyone to follow you. You're such a joy. And thank you so much for being on this fun podcast.
No, thank you for having me. You're amazing, and I just love what you have done with this platform. You're doing great work, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'll see you.